Okay, let's talk about working with 4K in Adobe Premiere Pro CC. Now, to begin with, Premiere Pro can handle it quite nicely. It's just a matter of, do you have enough RAM? Do you have the appropriate CPU strength? And are you working possibly with solid state hard drives? And do you have an external 4K monitor, or is your computer screen capable of handling 4K? So you can actually see what that looks like. Now, that aside, Premiere Pro does have a couple of hurdles and a couple of questions that you may need to consider. Number one, there are two different types of 4K resolution out right now. There's DCI and then there's UHD. DCI resolution of 4K is 4096 by 2160. Now that DCI resolution is a standard that is set for display purposes within a theater. In fact, most theaters across the US can handle that and are currently showing at that resolution. So if you're planning on submitting your work that will be displayed in a theater, or you are planning on putting your film or your movie into a film festival, then you may want to consider contacting whoever it is that needs to be contacted and ask them if they'll accept DCI standard. Now, the other popular resolution of 4K is UHD, and that's at 3840 by 2160. And both of those are considered 4K. They're both very popular, by the way, and a lot of cameras are offering both as an option. You just have to drill down in your menu within the camera and then decide which resolution you want to shoot at, and then of course what resolution will you edit at in Premiere Pro. Now, some of you of course are still editing 1920 by 1080, and there's nothing wrong with that, but both resolutions, 1920 by 1080, and I'll just call it 4K to keep it simple, a lot of you are mixing those two resolutions, which is fine. In fact, some of you are bringing in photos to mix into a 4K sequence as well. So I'm going to talk about all of that in this lesson. So to begin with, you do need to set up your sequence appropriately. So here in my project, I do not have a sequence. In fact, it's just about blank other than what's in my project over here on the left-hand side. And I'm going to navigate up to my 4K bin. I happen to have one video clip in there at 4K. So I'll mouse click on the triangle to the left to reveal that, and I'll double click on this clip to open it into the source window. And that is actually shot at UHD, which is, there it is, there's a resolution, 3840 by 2160. And it doesn't matter what resolution this video clip is based on what I'm about to show you, because if it's 4096 by 2160, 3840 by 2160, or 1920 by 1080, this following rule applies. If you quickly want to make a sequence that will handle your resolution, whether it's 4K or 2K, whether you want it to handle that particular resolution on a video clip or not, can be done the following way. Simply control-click on it if you're on a Mac, or right-click on it if you're on a PC. And then navigate down to this option here, which is New Sequence from Clip. And when you select that, Premiere Pro will automatically create the appropriate resolution type sequence to match that clip. So it's quite simple from that point forward. You can simply continue to add your clips if they're all the same resolution, that is, or even if they're not, you can still do that. But you can continue now to add all your clips within this sequence and finish assembling your movie and then export out at that resolution, whichever resolution you decide to do it at. Now, some people are adding footage that's a different type of resolution, such as 1920 by 1080. So I'm going to navigate over to, let's go here to this particular bin here. I've got plenty of HD footage there. If I mouse click on a clip here and I drag that into my sequence, not a problem until I park my playhead over that clip. So when I click on the timecode area here of my sequence, you'll quickly see that this particular video clip doesn't quite fit within a 4K sequence. So I have to scale this. And there's a couple of ways I can do this. The quick way is I can control click on the clip and select set to frame size. And when I do that, Premiere Pro CC will automatically scale it up. It'll scale 1920 by 1080 video up to 3840 to 2160, which is the resolution of this sequence, 3840 by 2160. As a matter of fact, I'm going to double click on this HD clip to load it into my source window, and then I'll navigate up to the Effect Controls tab. I'll click on that, and then I'll navigate over here to the left into the motion category. I'll click on the triangle there so it points down, and you'll see here that it scaled it up exactly to 200%. It basically blew it up, or technically it scaled it. And Premiere really does a good job at scaling. it actually doesn't look too bad, especially if you shot your HD footage properly. You could easily put that into a 4K container. Now, keep in mind though, this is a 3840 by 2160 sequence, otherwise known as a container, and 1920 by 1080 fits in it correctly when you scale it up. If this sequence was 4096 by 2160, you'd have a little bit of an issue, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So that's how you mix HD with 4K. That's how you mix these two formats. But what if you're working with photos? So I'm going to navigate over here to bring in a photo. Most current cameras, DSLR cameras, are shooting at a high resolution. And as a matter of fact, you can see over here in my project window that this particular DSLR camera, it's a Canon DSLR camera, full frame. I was shooting these photos at 5616 by 3744, which is pretty high res. I'm going to then mouse click on one of these photos, and I'm going to drag it down into my sequence, and I'm going to park my playhead right over that particular photo. And it doesn't look too bad as it sits, but I still want to continue to do that same technique where I control click on that item, which in this case it's a photo, and I'm going to select set to frame size. Now when I do that, Premiere Pro will automatically scale it so that it fits the entire image within this sequence container, which is the reason why you see the photo, which I believe is 4:3 and a 16:9 container, or 3840 by 2160 container. So I'm going to double click on this photo to load it into the source window. There it goes. And then I'm going to navigate up to the Effect Controls tab, and I'll go over to the motion option, and I'll see here that it scaled it down to 57.7%. So it actually made it smaller so that it would fit in my sequence movie. And basically, if I wanted to output my movie right now, let's say I was done, I would have these black bars on the left and one on the right, which I'm not happy about. So I would want to scale this up just a little bit. So there's a couple ways to do this. I could select this motion option right here, and when I click on this motion option here, I get this wireframe, right? I could mouse click on a corner, mouse click and drag to scale it, or I can navigate to the scale numeric value, which you see where my cursor is now. I could mouse click and drag to the right or to the left to scale. So I'll do that now. I'll mouse click and I'll drag to the right, and look at that. It just scaled it up perfectly. Now I am going to lose the top and the bottom of that photo because the aspect ratio of the photo does not match the aspect ratio of this particular video resolution. In fact, most video resolutions photos do not fit. So you have to scale up, basically, or scale down, depending on the image that you get. So to see what you're going to be missing, you can navigate over here to your program window at the bottom left where it says fit, or right where this down arrow is, click on that and select 25%, or even 10%. I'll go back and select 10%. There we go. And I can see here at the top and on the bottom, I'm missing part of that photo. So you may have to move the photo up by clicking and dragging, or move the photo down so you can reveal the portion of the clip that you want to work with. Now the good news though with photos is that this will look spectacular, these photos, when you output it and display this on a 4K display. A lot of photographers are starting to do this where they'll add just photos to a sequence, and they'll edit and remain in 4K, and then they'll export out at 4K, and then they display their photos on a 4K display, and it looks spectacular. And some photographers are saying that it looks better than a print, and they have the flexibility of changing it and putting multiple photos within that frame of a 4K display, which is really convenient and of course shows off the work quite nicely. Okay. With that said, if you wanted to, or if you had to create a sequence from scratch, let's say you're working with a photo, right? And you don't want to create a sequence from this native resolution, because if you did, it wouldn't quite fit in a display correctly. You'd have to create a sequence from scratch, right? A 4K display. So let me show you how to do that. You can navigate up to the word file here at the top, mouse click and select new. Sequence, there we go. And then that'll open up your new sequence options. And I'm drawn to the red R3D option because this particular folder you could start with, because it has most of the 4K options already dialed in. And I'm going to navigate to 4K 16:9 2997. You could go to 24, that's the frame rate, but I'm going to go with 2997. And then of course you can type in the name. I'll just type in 4K display for pictures, and I'll select OK. Now once I do this, the codec is great, by the way. That's a fabulous codec by Red. Not a problem with your photos. Everything else is dialed in correctly. You can even add a music or song in the background if you'd like, but I'm going to click on the OK button on the bottom right. And of course, I now have a blank sequence. I'll click on the sequence to begin with, right? And then I'll navigate up to the sequence option here at the top menu. I'll mouse click on that and I'll select sequence settings. And I'm doing that because I do need to change one, if not two items. If I wanted my resolution, which is frame size, to match DCI, I can leave 4096 alone, but I would have to change this right here. I would have to change the vertical to 2160, right? And when I do that, when I select OK, this changed slightly, which is my program window changed ever so slightly, and that would fit perfectly on a display in a theater, right? If I wanted to go UHD, which a lot of standard 4K displays also show. Remember, standard 4K displays could either be DCI standard or UHD, either one. I think the more expensive ones are going to be DCI and UHD. The less expensive 4K displays are going to be UHD only. Keep that in mind, that's important. Well, then I'm going to have to click on my sequence one more time, navigate up to the sequence option here at the top, mouse click and select sequence settings, and now I'm going to have to change both of these, right? I'm going to have to change the horizontal and vertical resolution. So I'll change that first one to 3840, and then I'll change the second one here to 2160. I guess I could have just left that there, 2160, and then I'm good to go. Everything else is fine. I'll click on the OK button here. And that again changed a little bit. It changed the my program window just slightly. Now I can go get my photos, right? In fact, I'll take a bunch of these. I'll drag down, let's say I'll drag down a group of 4. I'll drag these down into my sequence, right? Just like that. I'll park my playhead over one of them. In fact, let's do this. Park my playhead over this clip right here, or that photo, and I could either control click on that clip, or in this case it's a photo, or right click on it if you're on a PC and select set to frame size. And then again, it being Premiere Pro scaled it down, and then I could select that photo just one time so that it opens up in the Effect Controls tab up here, and then I'll navigate over to the motion option, into the scale. I'll mouse click on this numeric value and I'll scale up the photo accordingly, or according to how I want to scale that photo. Now, I could also select a group of photos, right? By creating a square lasso like that. I can control click on that group and select set to frame size. And now these photos will also be correctly scaled to fit the resolution of my sequence. So once I'm done doing that, once I'm done correctly adding the content, I'll go back to this sequence. Once I'm done correctly adding the content to my sequence, then of course I can edit my movie in 4K. Now, once I'm done though, just like anything else, just like editing any type of resolution like I've shown you in these lessons, then you have to consider how you're going to output your movie. You can output via the export option, right? You can navigate up to, of course, after you render your movie. Once you've done that, or you don't have to render it, but I do recommend that you do render your movie, and then you can watch it back at the same resolution possibly that your client would, and you can catch any mistakes before you deliver, but it's up to you if you want to render or not. You can click on your sequence, navigate up to the word file here at the top, mouse click on that, and then select Export Media. Now, I'm not going to go through all the options of exporting in this lesson. I have a dedicated lesson just for exporting, but you do have the choice though to change the resolution here by unchecking this box right here. And you can then type in the resolution that you want to export out at. Now, notice here it defaults to the resolution of my sequence, which is fine, but some of your customers may not be able to take 4K, right? Some of their websites may not be able to. You know, there are other services out there that may not accept 4K. And then you may be asking yourself, well, why should I shoot in 4K? Well, remember, one of the golden rules of video production is you try to shoot at the highest resolution possible, right? You shoot and you edit at that higher resolution, then you scale down on delivery. And then it just looks incrementally better when you shoot and edit at a higher resolution. So keep that in mind. Here you can type in whatever you want. I can type in 1920 by 1080, right? And then I would deliver at that. Premiere Pro on export would then scale down my 4K movie out to that 1920 by 1080 resolution, or I could go 1280 by 720, or I could leave it at 4K. The point is, you have a lot of options here in export, and I encourage you to go back and watch the export lesson when you want to export your movie. But that's about it for working with 4K media or video within Adobe Premiere Pro CC.